The Zenith Assembly chamber was a cathedral of light and shadow, an impossibly vast dome suspended over a planet-sized structure that functioned as the heart of the Galactic Empire. Here, decisions that shaped the fate of billions were made, deliberated upon by a council of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. At the center of the room, a single human stood alone. Ambassador Elias Carter had prepared for this moment his entire career. He had memorized every diplomatic precedent, every historical case of species ascension, and every minor regulation that governed the Assembly's proceedings. Yet as he stood before the towering figures of the Council, he couldn't shake the feeling of being utterly insignificant. The chamber's walls shimmered with ethereal projections of planetary systems, data streams flowing like living rivers of information. Holographic representations of entire civilizations floated in massive, translucent orbs, their histories condensed into luminescent records. Each species seated in the chamber had a story of struggle, evolution, and conquest, thousands, even millions of years in the making. Humanity's own orb was pathetically small in comparison, barely a flickering ember. At the head of the assembly, the High Arbiter, a being known as Vorik Sun, regarded Carter with something between amusement and boredom. His species, the Velsari, were among the oldest in the known galaxy, creatures of crystalline exoskeletons and luminous eyes that held the weight of eons. His voice resonated through the chamber like rolling thunder. Ambassador Elias Carter, you stand before this assembly to petition for the ascension of your species into the recognized interstellar order. He paused, his glowing eyes narrowing. Your people have expanded beyond their homeworld, constructed rudimentary colonies, and now seek entry among those who have ruled the stars for millennia. But tell me, human, what do you offer? Carter knew this moment was coming. It was the same question posed to every species before humanity. He straightened his posture. Humanity offers innovation, cooperation, and progress. Our history is one of overcoming adversity, of solving the impossible through ingenuity and resilience. We do not claim to be your equals in age, but we have achieved in mere centuries what took others millennia. Given the chance, we would contribute to the empire in ways that even you might not foresee. There was a murmur of amusement among the gathered species. The SciFi, a race of elongated cephalopods known for their technological mastery, let out a series of clicking laughs. The Orntel, an avian species with metallic feathers, ruffled their wings in clear disdain. Vorik Sun tilted his head. You speak boldly, but words do not make a species worthy. The reality is this: humanity is young. Your technology is crude compared to ours. Your understanding of galactic politics is laughable. And your lifespan, well, by the time the Velsari finish a single political cycle, generations of your kind will have lived and died. Carter clenched his fists at his sides. He had expected condescension, but hearing it aloud still stung. Then let us prove ourselves, he said firmly. Vorik Sun exchanged glances with his fellow council members. A silent debate passed between them, a conversation conducted at speeds no human could follow. When he turned back to Carter, his expression was unreadable. Very well, the High Arbiter said at last. The Assembly has convened. It is decided that humanity will be given a trial. Carter's pulse quickened. What kind of trial? A new hologram appeared in the air before him. A bleak, desolate world. The planet's surface was cracked and lifeless, its atmosphere barely existent. It was the image of a graveyard, a celestial corpse orbiting a dying sun. This is Asteris, Vorik Sun declared. A dead world. No atmosphere. No native biosphere. No water. No resources beyond barren rock. If humanity wishes to prove its worth, you will do so by terraforming this world into something habitable. Carter's breath hitched. Terraforming was a monumental undertaking, something that took even the most advanced species centuries to achieve. He knew instantly what was happening. This wasn't a challenge. It was a death sentence. He wasn't the only one to recognize it. From across the chamber, the SciFi representative let out a deep chuckle. Even we require centuries for such a task, the alien said. And yet you expect the humans to do it. The Orntel representative shook his head. It is a mercy. Let them try. They will fail. And when they do, they will finally understand their place. Carter refused to look away from the hologram. His mind was already racing, calculating, considering the impossible. This was meant to be a punishment, a way for the assembly to be rid of humanity's ambitions. But what if it wasn't? He turned back to Vorkson. How long do we have? A cruel smile played across the High Arbiter's face. 50 years. Gasps rippled through the chamber. 50 years? That was nothing in terms of planetary engineering. Terraforming required slow, delicate processes, introducing microbial life, altering atmospheric composition, melting ice deposits. It was a process that took ages. And yet, Carter found himself nodding. We accept. A stunned silence filled the chamber. Even Vorkson seemed momentarily surprised. He leaned forward. You accept. Carter straightened. Yes, humanity will terraform Astris. And when we do, we will prove that we belong here. Laughter rippled through the chamber, some amused, some outright mocking. Carter let them laugh. It didn't matter. He had just won humanity's one and only chance. Vorkson studied him for a long moment, then finally inclined his head. Then it is decided. Humanity has 50 years to accomplish the impossible. The chamber's lights dimmed, signaling the conclusion of the proceedings. Carter turned on his heel and strode toward the exit, his mind already preparing for what came next. The moment he stepped outside the chamber, his personal communicator buzzed. He answered. Carter, came a voice. Admiral Way, one of Earth's leading military minds. What the hell did you just agree to? Carter exhaled slowly. A chance, Admiral. He looked up at the stars beyond the assembly station. And now we have 50 years to change the galaxy forever. The moment Ambassador Elias Carter returned to Earth, he was met with a storm. The United Earth government had assembled in the orbital city of Novice Prime, a vast station suspended above Earth like a second moon. It was a place where world leaders, top scientists, and military minds converged to shape humanity's future. Tonight, however, its grand chambers echoed with panic. A live projection of Asteris dominated the room, a lifeless husk of rock and dust, a planet that had no right to ever bear life. You agreed to what? President Darius Fairmont demanded, his voice barely controlled. He was an aging man, his hair silvered from years of leading humanity through the perils of interstellar diplomacy. 50 years? To terraform a dead planet? Carter, that's suicide. Carter stood his ground. It was our only chance. If we refused, we would have been dismissed outright. This way, we have a shot. A shot at what? Dr. Leila Sato, lead planetary scientist, scoffed. Terraforming takes centuries. We don't have that time. You might as well have promised them we'd turn lead into gold while we were at it. Admiral Way, a hardened veteran with a reputation for impossible victories, leaned forward. Tell me something, Carter. Did you take this deal knowing it was impossible, or did you actually believe we could pull it off? Carter exhaled. This was the moment. I believe we can do it, but not the way the other species expect. The room quieted. That was enough of a hook to get them to listen. We don't play by their rules, Carter continued. The assembly thinks we'll approach this the way they do, long-term ecological balancing, gradual atmospheric sculpting, slow microbial introduction. But that's not how humans operate. We cut corners. We hack the system. We solve problems in ways no one else even considers. Sato folded her arms. Go on. Carter turned to the room's hollow displays, bringing up data from the most advanced terraforming projects undertaken by the assembly civilizations. The fastest terraforming effort on record took 360 years, conducted by the Solari Collective. It was considered a miracle of engineering. I don't doubt that their methods are effective, but they're not efficient. They refuse to take risks. They're afraid of radical solutions. Admiral Way caught on immediately. And we're not. Carter allowed himself a small smirk. We never have been. The room fell into thoughtful silence. Then President Fairmont sighed, rubbing his temples. You're suggesting an entirely new approach to terraforming, aren't you? Carter nodded. We don't just replicate what's been done before. We invent something new. Over the next 3 weeks, the greatest scientific minds on Earth worked around the clock, formulating an approach that would redefine planetary engineering. The first breakthrough came from Dr. Sato's team, who proposed using genetically engineered microbes capable of converting raw planetary minerals into atmosphere-building compounds. These microbes wouldn't just seed asteroids with life. They would consume the planet's own material to generate a breathable environment at an accelerated rate. Instead of waiting millennia for plants to produce oxygen, Sato explained, we design microbes that do it in decades. The second breakthrough came from Project Helios, an AI-driven orbital mirror array designed to manipulate a planet's climate artificially. Our greatest hurdle is temperature, said Dr. Malik Rana, head of AI climate systems. We can't wait centuries for natural warming. Instead, we deploy an array of orbital mirrors, focusing sunlight where it's needed most, jump-starting the atmospheric process. The third breakthrough came from bioengineered ecosystems, a radical idea spearheaded by a group of rogue biotechnologists who had previously been dismissed as reckless. We don't just terraform, one of them, Dr. Evelyn Rourke, said. We grow the planet. Their proposal? Gene-forged flora that could root in toxic soil, absorbing deadly elements, and converting them into fertile ground at exponential rates. These weren't just plants. They were terraforming machines designed by nature itself. Admiral Wei, despite his military background, was one of the first to see the potential. We're forcing evolution to work in real time. President Fairmont leaned back in his chair, staring at the assembled scientists. You're proposing the most aggressive planetary transformation project in history. Carter met his gaze. We don't have time to be careful. With the plan set, humanity moved at a frantic pace. Massive terraforming ships were constructed in record time. AI-driven factories producing drones, bioreactors, and atmospheric generators at unprecedented speeds. The first wave of microbial terraformers was launched in just 2 years, spreading across Asteros' surface. Within 5 years, the orbital mirror array was deployed, slowly raising temperatures to habitable levels. By year 10, a thin atmosphere had begun to form. The assembly watched in stunned silence. The Velsari High Arbiter, Vorik Sun, had dismissed the project as folly, yet he could not deny what he saw. Impossible, one Zyphar scientist muttered. They're moving too fast. They will destabilize the planet. But humanity didn't stop. By year 15, the first engineered plant life took root, bioengineered organisms that survived where nothing should have lived. By year 20, artificial rivers were forming as self-replicating hydro-extraction machines pulled moisture from beneath the planet's crust. By year 30, the first human settlers arrived, not as visitors, but as residents of Asteros. And by year 45, something extraordinary happened. Asteros was not just habitable, it was thriving. The planet's atmosphere was stable, its biosphere self-sustaining. The very methods that had been labeled reckless, impossible, or dangerous had succeeded. Humanity had hacked terraforming itself. When the Zenith Assembly reconvened for the final inspection, their expectations were clear. They still believed humanity had failed. But when they arrived, they were met not with barren wastelands, but oceans, forests, and a living, breathing world. For the first time in recorded history, a civilization had terraformed a planet in mere decades. Vorik soon stood on the surface of Asteros, feeling the wind against his crystalline skin, his luminous eyes dark with disbelief. This is not possible, he whispered. Ambassador Carter, now older but victorious, stood beside him. We never cared about what was possible, he said, only about what needed to be done. The High Arbiter turned to him, expression unreadable. Humanity has defied expectation at every turn. Carter smiled. Get used to it. Humanity was no longer insignificant. They were the architects of the future. The moment the Zenith Assembly departed from Asteros, their disbelief lingering in the air like a ghost, humanity knew the real battle was just beginning. Terraforming the planet had been a scientific miracle, but surviving the political storm that followed, that was another challenge altogether. The scrutiny begins. The Assembly's return to their Galactic Council chambers marked the beginning of a new era of galactic politics, and humanity was at the center of it. The Velsuri High Arbiter, Vorik Sun, stood before the gathered leaders of the Zenith Assembly, his crystalline fingers drumming against the carved metal of his podium. The chamber was full, representatives from every major species watching, waiting, murmuring among themselves about the impossible. Asteris had been transformed. In 50 years, a blink of an eye in galactic time, humanity had done what no civilization had ever dared. It was an insult to history, a violation of precedent, an unforgivable defiance of the natural order. This, Vorik soon began, his deep voice carrying through the chamber, should not have been possible. The murmuring grew louder. Some of the assembly members looked uneasy, others furious. The SciFi representative, whose species had been responsible for the previous fastest terraforming project at over 3 centuries, clicked his long, chitinous fingers together. His voice was dry, laced with skepticism. "There must be an explanation," he said. "Either they have discovered some unknown natural phenomenon to accelerate the process, or they have cheated." The Orntel, ever dismissive of human ingenuity, ruffled his metallic feathers. "More likely, they have destabilized the planet in a reckless attempt to bypass the laws of nature." Vorik Sun's glowing eyes narrowed. "Then we shall find out. Asteris will be placed under immediate investigation. If humanity had cut corners in a way that threatened galactic stability, there would be consequences." Back on Earth, Ambassador Elias Carter watched the Assembly's decision unfold through a secure comlink in Novice Prime. He sighed, rubbing his temples as the weight of their achievement came crashing down on him. "They can't accept it," he muttered. Across the table, Admiral Way scoffed. "Of course they can't. We just made their entire way of thinking obsolete. This isn't about Asteris, it's about power. They don't want to believe we're on their level." Dr. Layla Sato, now leading the Terraforming Sciences Division, exhaled sharply. "Let me guess. They're going to claim we cheated." "They already have," Carter confirmed. Sato smirked, folding her arms. "Then let's show them exactly how we did it." A team of Assembly scientists, analysts, and bureaucrats descended upon Asteris within days. Their job was to scrutinize every detail of the terraforming project, analyze the soil composition, study the atmospheric changes, dissect the artificial biosphere. Anything to prove that humanity had somehow violated the fundamental laws of planetary engineering. For weeks, they scoured the world, and what they found shocked them. The planet was not only stable, it was more stable than any previous terraformed world in history. The methods that changed everything. The findings were undeniable. The engineered microbial terraformers were still functioning without decay, creating a constantly self-sustaining atmospheric process. The orbital mirror array had successfully manipulated climate conditions without long-term planetary damage. The bioengineered ecosystems were evolving faster than anticipated, growing more efficiently than anything seen before. Asteris wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The Assembly's own experts couldn't deny it. Humanity had done the impossible, and they had done it safely. But acknowledging this came with a terrible cost. If they accepted humanity's achievement, they would have to rewrite centuries of policy and scientific doctrine. If they rejected it, they would have to manufacture a reason to dismiss humanity's success, a move that could fracture the Assembly's credibility. And worse still, other species were watching. Several young civilizations, long relegated to the sidelines of the galactic stage, took notice. If humanity could defy the impossible, what else could be changed? A dangerous thought began to spread. If humanity could do in decades what others took centuries to accomplish, what if the Zenith Assembly was no longer necessary? Before the Assembly could render their final judgment, something unexpected happened. A delegation from the Ryla Consortium, a mid-tier civilization known for their struggling planetary infrastructure, approached Earth in secret. Their leader, a slender, aquatic being with bioluminescent veins, spoke in a soft but eager voice. "We have a world," they said. "A world we have tried to terraform for 600 years. The process is slow, difficult. We are losing hope." They leaned forward. "We wish to contract human engineers to complete the project." Carter blinked. "You want us to terraform your planet?" "Yes." "Name your price." Within days, more requests followed. Dozens of civilizations, all struggling with their own planetary projects, all desperate for results. Humanity had not just proven themselves. They had become the most valuable asset in the galaxy. And the Assembly knew it. Back in the Assembly chamber, Vorik soon stood before the gathered leaders, the weight of the situation pressing upon him. "The evidence is clear," he admitted. "Humanity has accomplished what we believed impossible, and they have done so in a manner that is stable, efficient, and replicable." He exhaled slowly. "This Assembly must now decide. Do we recognize humanity as a rising power, or do we attempt to suppress what they have achieved?" A silence settled over the chamber. The choice was monumental. After what felt like an eternity, one of the Assembly members, an elder representative of the Zara Collective, stood. Their voice was low, measured. "It is clear," they said, "that humanity has changed the future of planetary engineering. To deny this is to deny reality itself." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Voriksun's expression was unreadable, but he gave a slow nod. "Then it is decided." The verdict was made official. Humanity was to be recognized, not as an equal, but as a galactic force in planetary development. They were granted the right to terraform, to build, to reshape the stars under their own banner. It was not full acceptance, but it was the first step, the dawn of the architects. When Carter returned to Earth, the celebrations had already begun. The news had spread. Humanity had not just survived the Assembly's test. They had redefined the rules of the galaxy. Admiral Wei stood beside him as they watched the fireworks bloom over Earth's capital. So Wei said, grinning, "What's next?" Carter smirked. "Now." He turned his gaze toward the stars, toward the future. "Now we start building worlds." The stars above Asteris were clearer than any seen from Earth, unmarred by pollution or artificial light. The planet was alive, a thriving world that had once been nothing but a dead husk. Forests stretched across its surface, rivers wound through valleys, and its artificial oceans glittered under twin moons. It was a miracle of science, engineering, and raw human defiance. But miracles had consequences. The Zenith Assembly's fleet arrived in force. Not just observers, but warships. Massive, angular vessels bearing the insignia of the oldest species in the Empire loomed over Asteris. Their presence sent a clear message. Humanity's success was not something to be celebrated. It was something to be feared. On the surface, Ambassador Elias Carter and a team of scientists stood at the primary human colony, New Dawn, awaiting the arrival of the Assembly's delegation. The air was tense. They weren't just here to inspect the planet anymore. They were here to decide what to do about humanity. The landing craft descended in perfect formation, their shimmering force fields dispersing as representatives of multiple species stepped onto human soil. Voriksun, the High Arbiter, led them, his crystalline form catching the sunlight like a jagged prism. For a long moment, he simply stared. He had last seen Asteris as a barren wasteland. Now he stood on a world humanity had built in just 50 years, a world that rivaled those that had taken his own species millennia to cultivate. "This," Voriksun finally said, his voice almost reverent, "is unprecedented." His entourage spread out, scanning the air, testing the soil, running diagnostics on the planet's biosphere stability. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to shock. The readings were perfect. Gravity regulation within acceptable thresholds. 1 Orntel, scientist muttered. Atmospheric oxygenation consistent. Carbon exchange is accelerating? That's not possible. Voriksun turned to Carter, his luminous eyes unreadable. "Tell me how you did this." Carter smiled faintly. "We stopped thinking like you." The gathered alien scientists bristled at the statement, but Carter pressed on. Every civilization in this room follows a playbook, he continued. You all build worlds the same way. Slow, gradual, cautious. You nurture planets into existence, guiding them gently over centuries. He gestured at the lush landscape around them. We don't have centuries, so we built a system that could terraform itself. Dr. Layla Sato stepped forward. Our microbial terraformers don't just convert the environment, they evolve. Every year, they adapt to the changing planetary conditions, accelerating the process exponentially. Dr. Evelyn Rourke added, our bioengineered flora aren't just passive. They communicate through fungal networks, speeding up the stabilization of entire ecosystems. It's not just terraforming, it's biological engineering on a planetary scale. Vorik Sun's jaw tightened. And your orbital systems? Dr. Malik Rana, head of planetary climate control, smirked. We use AI-driven orbital mirrors to regulate planetary temperature and climate shifts in real time. No waiting for ice caps to melt or oceans to stabilize. We control the process from above and below. The alien scientists were silent. There was nothing to critique. The planet was flawless. For the first time in history, the Zenith Assembly was looking at a species that had surpassed them in planetary engineering. The SciFi delegate finally spoke, their elongated limbs twitching with unease. This level of planetary manipulation is dangerous. Carter's expression darkened. Dangerous to who? The SciFi hesitated. To the balance of power, Vorik Sun answered for them. That was the truth of it. Humanity had not just proven themselves. They had disrupted the galactic hierarchy. The great civilizations of the Assembly had built their entire identities on the idea that progress took time, that the young species of the galaxy had to earn their place through patience and obedience. Humanity had shattered that illusion. You fear what this means, Carter said quietly, because it means you're not as far ahead of us as you thought. Silence. The Orntel ambassador's metallic wings ruffled. This technology, if it were misused, it could create ecological catastrophes. Entire worlds could be reshaped in ways that destabilize entire sectors. Dr. Sato narrowed her eyes. And you think we don't understand that? You think we'd build something this powerful and use it recklessly? It is not about your understanding, Vorik Sun said gravely. It is about what happens when this knowledge spreads. Carter understood immediately. This wasn't just about humanity anymore. It was about every other species watching. If humanity could terraform worlds in decades, why should any younger species be forced to wait centuries for their own place in the stars? The entire political structure of the empire was now at risk. A threat or an opportunity? Vorik Sun turned back to Carter. The Assembly must deliberate on this. Carter smirked. Take all the time you need. We've already moved on to our next projects. The High Arbiter's eyes narrowed. What projects? Admiral Wei, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. Multiple civilizations have already approached us, he said. They've asked for our help. Terraforming projects they've struggled with for centuries. He crossed his arms. And we said yes. The delegation stiffened. Carter folded his hands behind his back. The truth is, the Assembly can't stop us. You can't take this knowledge away. You can't roll back what we've done here. So you have a choice. He met Vorik Sun's gaze. You can work with us, or you can fight the future. The chamber was silent. 3 weeks later, the Assembly reconvened. The verdict was clear. Humanity's methods were officially acknowledged. Not fully embraced. Not yet, but recognized as legitimate. The Assembly would allow human-led terraforming to continue, but under strict monitoring and regulation. They called it a compromise. Humanity called it the beginning of something bigger. As Carter left the Assembly chamber, his communicator buzzed. He answered. Carter, came Dr. Sato's voice. We just got another request. A high-priority one. He raised an eyebrow. From who? There was a pause. The Veilshan sovereignty. Carter stopped walking. The Veilshan were one of the oldest races in the Empire. A civilization that had never sought help from anyone. And now, they were coming to humans for aid. Admiral Wei chuckled when Carter told him. We're not just playing the game anymore, he said. We're changing the board. Carter looked up at the stars. Humanity was no longer insignificant. They were no longer just another species in the Empire. They were the architects of the galaxy. The moment the Zenith Assembly begrudgingly recognized humanity's methods, everything changed. It wasn't full acceptance. Not yet. The great powers of the Empire still viewed Earth as an anomaly, a civilization that had upset the galactic hierarchy in ways they could not have predicted. But recognition was enough. It meant humanity could operate freely, take on contracts, and begin terraforming not just asteroids, but entire worlds. And they wasted no time. The first contracts came from smaller, struggling civilizations, races that had spent centuries trying to terraform their own worlds with little success. The Ryla Consortium was the first. Their homeworld's second moon had been designated for habitation centuries ago, but had remained barren due to slow atmospheric processing. When humanity deployed its bioengineered terraformers, they did in 10 years what the Ryla had been attempting for 400. Then came the Zara Collective, whose colonies were on the verge of collapse due to ecosystem failures. And then came the Veilshan sovereignty. The Veilshan were a species so ancient that their historical records predated the founding of the Zenith Assembly itself. They were known for their vast knowledge, their unshakable traditions, and their utter disdain for younger civilizations. And yet they had reached out. A private transmission was sent to Novice Prime, encrypted and directed to a single recipient, Ambassador Elias Carter. He accepted the call. A holographic form appeared before him. A Veilshan elder, her luminous, silver eyes filled with something Carter had never expected from their kind. Desperation. "Our homeworld," she said. "It is dying." Carter felt a chill. Veilshan Prime was one of the oldest continuously inhabited planets in the Empire, a world that had stood for millions of years. "The atmosphere is degrading," the elder admitted. "Our planetary core is destabilizing. We have attempted to repair it for centuries, but—" she hesitated. "We have failed." She exhaled slowly. "We wish to contract your kind to restore it." The request sent shockwaves through the Empire. For an elder race, to ask humanity for assistance was unthinkable. It was an admission that the old ways were no longer enough. The Assembly met in emergency session. "This is an unprecedented request," Vorksoon announced. "If humanity succeeds, they will no longer just be an accepted species in the Empire. They will be a pillar of it." The SciFi representative scowled. "And if they fail?" Carter stood before them, his expression unwavering. "We won't." The Assembly reluctantly approved the request. Humanity had transformed dead worlds before. They had terraformed asteroids in 50 years. But Veilshan Prime? This was different. The planet was old, fragile, unstable. Terraforming, it wasn't just about reshaping the surface. It was about saving an ancient world from extinction. For the first time, humanity wasn't just building something new. They were saving something ancient. The Terraforming Sciences Division deployed everything. AI-driven atmospheric regulators were installed in the planet's upper layers, controlling the rapid loss of oxygen. Deep core stabilizers, designed to regulate planetary tectonics, were built into the mantle. Bioengineered superorganisms were introduced, designed to rebind and regenerate dying soil. The project was the most complex humanity had ever undertaken. And for the first time, they had to work alongside an elder species, learning from millions of years of Veilshan knowledge while integrating their own radical solutions. As the project progressed, something else began to happen. Other civilizations watched closely, and one by one, the mid-tier powers of the Empire began siding with humanity. "We need what they offer," the Ryla Chancellor declared. "Humanity's technology is not a threat. It is an evolution." The Zara Collective followed. Then the Orntel. The Empire was fracturing, not into war, but into something far more dangerous to the old rulers. Progress. Veilshan Prime's restoration took 30 years. When the project was completed, the ancient world thrived once more. The High Elders of the Veilshan personally addressed the Assembly for the first time in centuries. "We acknowledge humanity as the architects of the future," the Elder declared. Their wisdom, their methods, and their defiance of the impossible have reshaped our understanding of what is possible. The chamber was silent, and then Vorkson stood. The Zenith Assembly has ruled this empire for millennia, he said. We have guided it, protected it, shaped its laws and its future. His gaze swept the chamber. But now we must ask ourselves, are we the ones holding it back? A new era begins. The vote was cast. Humanity was granted full recognition, not as a minor player in the empire, but as one of its primary forces of advancement. Terraforming was no longer a slow, sacred art. It was a human-led industry. Entire civilizations began lining up for human assistance, their old methods abandoned in favor of faster, better, more efficient solutions. And for the first time, the future of the empire was no longer in the hands of the ancient species alone. It was in the hands of the architects of the galaxy. The day humanity was formally recognized as one of the empire's leading powers, the galaxy changed forever. For centuries, progress had been controlled, governed by the ancient species of the Zenith Assembly, who dictated the pace of development, ensuring that young civilizations evolved slowly, carefully, predictably. Humanity had broken that system. With their radical approach to terraforming, they had rewritten the rules of planetary development. Planets that were once considered lost causes were now thriving in mere decades. Civilizations that had once begged the Assembly for assistance now came directly to humanity for solutions. And not everyone was happy about it. The moment humanity cemented its place as a galactic power, the old guard of the Assembly began plotting. The SciFi Dominion, who had once held a monopoly on advanced planetary engineering, saw their influence crumbling. The Oriental Ascendancy, who had believed humanity to be a reckless anomaly, now found themselves surrounded by worlds shaped by human hands. And the Velsari, the oldest of them all, watched in silence, their leaders unreadable. But behind closed doors, the conversations were the same. They're moving too fast. They destabilize the balance of power. If we allow this to continue, what will they take next? The answer, though unspoken, was clear. Everything. The first act of open resistance came 2 years after humanity's recognition. The project was called Nephos 6, a failed colony world where the air was toxic, the soil sterile, and the gravitational field unstable. It was a perfect test case for humanity's advanced terraforming. The contract had been signed, the systems deployed, and progress was ahead of schedule until the disaster struck. Nephos 6 atmospheric stabilizers collapsed overnight. The climate, which had been carefully cultivated, spiraled into chaos. Storms raged, oxygen levels plummeted, and the colony, once on the verge of success, was forced into evacuation mode. Thousands of lives were lost. It was the first major failure of human-led terraforming, and it was no accident. Within days, forensic analysis of the wreckage confirmed what the Terraforming Sciences Division had suspected. The collapse had been deliberate. Sabotage. Someone had hacked into the orbital regulators, forcing them into a feedback loop that destabilized the entire process. The AI systems had detected unauthorized remote access, but by the time anyone had noticed, it was too late. And there was more. A single transmission had been intercepted, sent moments before the collapse. It was coded in an ancient Velsari encryption key. The message was simple. You have gone too far. This is your warning. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Empire. The Zenith Assembly was forced into an emergency session, this time under conditions of extreme secrecy. Carter stood before them, flanked by Admiral Way and Dr. Lailasado. Their expressions were grim. You did this, Carter said, his voice cold. He turned his gaze toward the Velsari delegation, though he knew others were involved as well. Vorkson, the High Arbiter, remained still. His crystalline form caught the dim chamber light, but his expression was unreadable. You have no proof, he said evenly. Dr. Sato snapped. We intercepted a transmission using a Velsari encryption signature. Vorkson did not flinch. You misunderstand. He leaned forward, his glowing eyes unblinking. If we had wanted to destroy you, there would be nothing left of your kind. Admiral Wei's jaw clenched, his military instincts flaring. So this wasn't you? Vorik-Sun exhaled slowly. Not all Velsari share my perspective. He glanced at the other assembly members. Not all civilizations do. That was when Carter realized the truth. This wasn't a unified act of sabotage. This was the start of a war, not between species, but between the old and the new. What happened next had never occurred in the history of the Empire. The Assembly, once the unchallenged authority over the galaxy, fractured. A new faction emerged, one that supported humanity's vision of rapid advancement and innovation. The younger species of the Empire, inspired by what they had seen, began demanding access to human technology, human techniques, human-led terraforming projects. The old guard resisted. The Velsari, Zyphar, and Orntel attempted to lock down access to critical resources, imposing new regulations that would make human-led terraforming efforts more difficult. But it was too late. The momentum was unstoppable. Humanity had not only changed planetary engineering, they had changed the very fabric of galactic power. The crisis reached its peak when the first human armada, led by Admiral Wei, was deployed to Nephos 6 ruined colony site to investigate further. The moment their ships entered the system, they found Velsari warships waiting for them. For the first time in history, the Empire stood on the brink of civil war. Carter, now one of the most powerful diplomats in the Empire, found himself at the heart of the standoff. This doesn't have to end in war, he told Vorik-Sun in a direct transmission. The High Arbiter regarded him for a long moment. No, he admitted, but war may be the only way to decide the future. The message was clear. The Empire could no longer exist as it had before. Either the old ways would crush progress, or progress would tear down the old ways. The diplomatic lines remained open, but both sides knew that time was running out. Humanity had forced the future into motion. Now, they would have to fight for it. As Carter sat in his office on Novice Prime, he received a new transmission. It was from one of the Velsari elders, but not Vorik-Sun. The message was short. You were never meant to rise this fast. But perhaps we were never meant to hold you back. The future of the Empire had to be decided, and humanity was at the center of it. The galaxy stood at the edge of an abyss. What had begun as a test of humanity's worthiness had spiraled into a crisis that threatened to tear the Zenith Assembly apart. Lines had been drawn. The old guard, Velsari, Zyphar, Orntel, and their allies, fought to preserve the status quo, terrified of what humanity's methods represented, the end of their control. The New Order, a coalition of young and mid-tier species, inspired by humanity's success, pushed for a new age of rapid development, one that rejected centuries of slow, calculated expansion in favor of bold, immediate progress. And at the center of it all stood Earth, no longer just another species in the Galactic Empire, but the single most disruptive force in history. On Novice Prime, Ambassador Elias Carter met with Vorik-Sun in person for the first time since Asteris. They stood in the grand observatory of the station, looking out at the swirling mass of ships that filled the void outside. Fleets from every major power had gathered, waiting for a decision. This is the end of the Empire as we know it, Vorik-Sun said, his voice calm but final. Carter didn't look away from the stars. No, he said, this is its evolution. The High Arbiter turned to face him. And what if we do not wish to evolve? Carter met his gaze, unwavering. Then you'll be left behind. A long silence followed. Finally, Vorik-Sun exhaled. His crystalline form dimmed slightly, a sign of deep contemplation among his kind. The Empire has existed for millions of years, he said. We have guided the young, nurtured them, ensured that progress did not consume the fabric of civilization. And in doing so, Carter countered, you've held back entire species for thousands of years. You created a glass ceiling and called it wisdom. Vorik-Sun tilted his head. You believe wisdom is letting chaos reign? Carter shook his head. I believe wisdom is knowing when to step aside and let the next generation shape the future. The High Arbiter studied him for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, The Assembly will not surrender control. Carter sighed. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. Then we'll take it from you. The old guard prepared for war. Their fleets moved into position. Their leaders whispered of crushing the rebellion, of erasing the upstart humans and their radical influence. But they never fired a shot, because, one by one, their own allies abandoned them. The Orntel defected first. Their leaders, once the most staunchly opposed to humanity's rise, saw the writing on the wall. They knew that clinging to the past meant irrelevance, and irrelevance meant extinction. The SciFi followed soon after, their economy already collapsing without access to human-led terraforming. And the Velsari? They stood alone. Vorik soon watched in stunned silence as the fleets that had once formed the backbone of the Galactic Empire turned their allegiance to humanity's new vision. And in that moment, he understood. This wasn't a war of weapons. It was a war of ideas. And humanity had already won. The Zenith Assembly was dissolved. In its place, a new governing body was formed, one built not on tradition, but on advancement. Humanity did not seize absolute power. Instead, they designed a framework of a decentralized council, where species could direct their own development without waiting for the approval of ancient overseers. Terraforming became a universal right, no longer restricted by bureaucratic delays or political maneuvering. Scientific collaboration flourished, leading to exponential leaps in technology. Faster-than-light travel became more efficient, energy production more sustainable, and new frontiers of artificial intelligence and biotechnology were unlocked. The young civilizations of the Empire thrived in ways never seen before. And at the center of it all was humanity. The ones who had once been dismissed as insignificant. The ones who had been given an impossible test. The ones who had, against all odds, reshaped the destiny of an entire galaxy. Years later, Carter stood on the surface of Valshan Prime, the ancient homeworld of the race that had once sought to crush humanity's influence. Now, the planet flourished, restored, thriving alive. Beside him, Vorik soon watched the twin suns set over the restored oceans. This was once a dying world, the former High Arbiter murmured. We had all but given up on it. Carter smiled faintly. And now, Vorik's son was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he turned to Carter. Now it is a beginning. Humanity had done the impossible. Not by force, not by conquest, but by changing the rules, by refusing to accept limits, by hacking the system of the galaxy itself. And in doing so, they had become something far greater than they had ever imagined. Not just a species among the stars, not just a rising power, but the architects of a galaxy.